Sounds good. Thank you, Emma. It's right around 11, so let's go ahead and get started. For those of you who have just come in and joined us, my name is Zach Zimmerman. I'm the Events and Outreach Coordinator here in University Housing for Cal Poly, and we've got a number of professional and student staff on the line with us today. What we're going to do is take your questions via the chat box on the right-hand side. So you can see there's some questions trickling in already. We'll do our best to kind of synthesize the popular ones and discuss them out here in our video form, and then at the same time we'll try and answer as many as we can in response in the chat as well. So again, my name is Zach Zimmerman. I use he, his pronouns. You can see down at the bottom left of this first screen here. Hopefully you all can read this clearly. We are going to have our names kind of identified. You can see Keo, for example, in our chat right now has she, her pronouns and works for University Housing. So we just want to let you all know when you get a response in the chat that is coming from one of our housing teams. So we'll do our best to make that obvious for you. Do we want to just go ahead and introduce the rest of our staff here, and then we'll jump into some of these questions that are trickling in? And thank you to Emma and Julia who've already spoken, but Emma, you didn't introduce yourself. You can go ahead and start us off if you want to, and then we'll go on down the list here.
Yeah, definitely. My name is Emma. I'm a fourth-year business major concentrating in information systems. I've been working for University Housing for 3 years now as a tour guide. So I'm happy to be here with all of you guys. I've been involved all throughout campus in different disciplinaries. I have a couple minors in other areas of the colleges. I've also changed my major and studied abroad. So if you guys have questions about any of those, I'd be happy to answer them too.
Julia, you're the next one I see, and our participants have increased quite a bit. You want to reintroduce yourself here for everybody?
Sure. My name is Julia Bluff. I'm sorry, my computer is binging. My name is Julia Bluff. I'm the marketing coordinator for University Housing. I've been here for about 2 years. Previously, I was an alumna of Cal Poly. I went here for grad school, and before that I went to UC Santa Cruz, and I was also a transfer. So if you have any questions about those experiences, you can feel free to ask me as well.
All right, Annie, you're next on the list as you appear to me, and then we've got Caroline and then Anthony on deck.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Annie Chapman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a political science major and also have an entrepreneurship minor. If anyone is interested in either of those, I can answer questions, but also I am a university, part of the university's honors program. And I lived in that RLC my first year. So I can speak to that as well, which was in Nipumu. I'm also a senator on the Inner Housing Council, part of the swim club, some other, so I can speak to joining clubs and doing those kinds of things. Club sports are great at Cal Poly. And yeah, I miss SLO a lot, but I've been on Poly Escapes trips and explored the area a lot. So if you're interested in what students can do, even if they're first year, in the town of SLO, we can definitely speak to all of those questions as well.
Sounds good. Carolyn?
Hi, my name's Carolyn, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a second-year English major and environmental studies minor. I am also a housing ambassador who gives housing tours and works for University Housing. My first year, I lived in Muir Hall, which is the Red Bricks in the College of Liberal Arts Learning Community. And then this past year, I lived in Poly Canyon Village in the Substance-Free Learning Community. And I'm also involved in Crew on campus, which is a Christian organization. And I have recently been through the study abroad application and admissions process, so I can answer any questions about all that stuff.
All right, so Anthony and then Chloe and then Keo, and we'll keep on down the list here.
Morning all, my name is Anthony Lewis. I am a coordinator of student development within housing, and coordinators of student development, or CSDs, are full-time live-in professionals. We're all master's level holding professionals. We supervise the resident advisors, RAs, as well as our graduate assistants in each of the communities. There are about 14 of us across campus, so there's at least one of us in each of the communities. We help to also oversee Inner Housing Council, which is kind of like associate student body, but for college, for residential students. I also help to oversee our front desk, which oversees the amenities and whatnot that are offered within each of the residence halls. and we help make sure that the facility side of things works smoothly as well. I'm a Cal Poly alum. I graduated with my undergrad from Cal Poly SLO in 2013 in ag science. Did my master's on the East Coast and I'm back here now for 2 years.
Great. Thank you. You got Chloe, then Clinton, or sorry, Chloe, then Keo, then Clinton, then Wen. And then I think we are all introduced.
Awesome. Okay, so my name is Chloe Smith. I am a second-year political science major. I just recently switched from sociology to political science, so I know a little bit about changing majors. I have 2 minors in environmental studies and sociology. I used to play club water polo for Cal Poly, and I used to live with an RA, so I know a little bit about the residential advisor position. As my first year, I lived in Yakitutu in the mindful living community, so I can speak to that, as well as I used to live in Poly Canyon Village as a second year.
My turn. So hi, I'm Keo. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am one of the lead ambassadors here along with Clinton, who will give his little intro. And I'm a 5th year biomedical engineering major and math minor, and I'm also out of state. So if anyone has like specific questions about any of those things, feel free to privately message me or anything. I just like kind of help oversee tours and know all things housing.
Yeah, so I'm Clinton. Alongside Keo, I'm a lead housing ambassador. I do use pronouns he, him, his. I'm a second-year architecture major with a theater minor. So when I do have time to get away from architecture, I like to do intramural sports. And I've also been a WOW leader for WOW. Yeah.
All right, and Wen, and then I think we are all introduced.
Okay, hi, I'm Wen. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a 3rd-year kinesiology major with a psychology minor. I am an RA. This is my 3rd year as an RA. I was an RA in PCV apartments last year, and this past year I was an RA in Yakitutu. So I've been involved in EPIC, which is an Asian American Christian club on campus, as well as several other cultural clubs, including PCE, which is the Filipino Cultural Exchange, and some of the other fraternities that are involved in business and community service. I've also been a part of the undergraduate research program as well, if you have any questions about that.
Sounds good. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And again, to those of you just joining us, my name is Zach Zimmerman. I'm the Events and Outreach Coordinator here at University Housing, and my fine panelists and myself will be answering your questions in the chat boxes on the right-hand side here, doing our best to kind of synthesize these big patterns that we see that lots of people are asking questions about and bring them up to the forefront here, as well as answering your individual questions in the chat dialogue on the right-hand side. So you'll see that all of our names have something similar to what mine does at the bottom of this slide here. Zach Zimmerman, I use he, his pronouns, and I'm from University Housing. So you can tell that one of our folks is responding to your question in the chat and not just another person here in the chat room with us. So with that being said, I'm going to switch over to one more slide here, and hopefully you all can see that. These are where some of our most common answers to your questions can be found. So I'll just go over this quickly, and then we'll dive into the questions that y'all have ticking in here on the right-hand side. So a major one that we send everybody to is to our housing.calpoly.edu FAQs, our frequently asked questions. You can find that with that URL, and I'll leave this page up for the duration of our chat today. The open house brochure is something that we produce every year as University Housing Marketing, and you can find that. I know that link is really long, but that's also on our housing.calpoly.edu website, and that has a lot of great information, timelines. It spells out where all of our residential learning communities, or RLCs, are located. Also lets you know about timelines for both first year and transfer student applications if you have some questions about those. Also lets you know about the amenities in each building and lots of other items. So that open house brochure, really a great thing to investigate. We also have a website that we've built in lieu of our virtual open house this year. It's called Explore Cal Poly. So you can see calpoly.edu/explore-cal-poly. And there are virtual tours of both campus and our housing developments here. So you can check out both our residence halls and our campus apartments, get a little bit more of a sense of what things look like both outside and in. I'm sure there will be lots of questions about our COVID-19 responses. You can find all of the up-to-date answers at coronavirus.calpoly.edu. And I can let everybody know that we don't have any decisions right now as far as virtual fall instruction. We're monitoring it very closely with local campus and state health officials and kind of keeping an eye on a very dynamic situation, as everybody knows. So no dates yet, unfortunately. I can let everybody know that we did prorate our adjustments, prorate our rates rather for the springtime. So coronavirus.calpoly.edu is where you can learn more about that. Also, our virtual open house schedule, there's a lot of things going on both today and throughout the rest of the week. Hopefully you've enjoyed the programming so far, but if you'd like to see more, calpoly.edu/virtual-open house, and that's where you can learn more about that. So with that being said, here we've got a bunch of questions coming in, and thank you so much everybody for being here today. And we'll try and answer these as much as possible. Two main ones that I saw coming in early. One, there was a few about study abroad. I think Carolyn and Wen, you both mentioned that you had experience with study abroad. Anybody else who wants to chime in about that? We'll speak a little bit more about that. And then I saw a few about requesting quad rooms and people who are curious about some more assignment details. So that'll be our second question upcoming. So whoever wants to tackle, speak a little bit more about the study abroad experience, and then what happened to your housing if you were in housing when you took that quarter off? Maybe we'll move on to the next question.
I can talk about how housing works with study abroad.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Julie.
Yeah. So I'm staff, obviously don't have study abroad experience, but one of the nice things about university housing, both as a first year and as a continuing student, is that we're very, very flexible for academic reasons. We understand that you're a student first, and it's important to us that you have those student experiences. So our housing leases are designed to be flexible for reasons connected to academia. And for certain reasons, you can be released from your housing contract or your housing license. Study abroad is one of those opportunities. So it doesn't, depending on when you are planning to study abroad, you would either sign up for housing later. If you're studying for fall, you wouldn't. If you're going to be abroad for fall, you wouldn't sign up for normal fall housing. You would sign up for housing for the quarter after. If you're going to study abroad in the middle of the year, you can cancel your housing for that experience. It's really easy to cancel your housing for a legitimate, an academic purpose. And we do for study abroad. If you're accepted to that program, we do give you a chance to cancel your housing. You do have to give us 30 days notice, and you do have to have a confirmation that you have been accepted to a study abroad program that's associated with Cal Poly. And then we release you from your housing contract so you can have that study abroad experience. The one thing is though that we can't hold your room while you're away. We essentially release you from your contract and you're no longer a resident for that time. You can come back and re-sign up for university housing, but if you had a room previously, that room might not be available again. Somebody else may have filled that space, but we can get you back into university housing as long as we have spaces open.
Sounds good. Thank you, Julia. Does someone else want to join in about the, we have a few folks curious about selecting as a group of 4. They're wondering if there are quad rooms available, or do you split into 2 doubles? What's the best way to approach if somebody's looking for a group of 4? And Julia, feel free to speak to this, or if anybody else wants to chime in, we're happy to rotate through as well.
Sure. So quads you can as far as roommates go, you can form a roommate group of 3. We don't allow you to form a room group of 4 just because there are so few quads available. Just for some context, there are 2 quad rooms on every single floor on Yaki Tutu, so it's only a handful across university housing. We wouldn't want to put you in a sort of a situation where you went into room selection, you had a 4-person group, there were no quads to be found, and all of a sudden you had to split up on the fly. So so that's why roommate groups are limited to groups of 3, just because triples and doubles are much more common than quads are. If you're looking to assign yourself into a quad, the best thing to do is to pre-split up your group. So a group of 3 or 1, or a group of 2 and 2. And then make sure your residential learning communities match. If at the time of your room selection appointment, the groups can go in and they see a quad available, both groups can independently assign themselves into the same quad if those spaces are available. But if the quads are all full at the time that you go in, at the very least, you would still have a roommate group to kind of fall back on, and you still would be with somebody that you knew.
Sounds good. Thanks, Julia. Let's talk a little bit about RLCs. There's a few questions in the chat here about, how do you find out which RLCs for you? We had one, do RLCs have bunk beds or not? Some of them, if you can know that information from an RLC. Also, how do you change your RLC? So I guess let's talk about how do you change your RLC, and that was another good one in there. Yeah, let's talk about how you change your RLC to start, and then I'll find the other question that I was going to ask. So maybe do we want to have one of our housing student staff want to respond to this one?
Keo, you want to take this one?
I got it.
Tell us about RLCs.
Yeah, so the way that RLCs work, at least the best way that I have to describe it is...
What does RLC stand for, by the way, for folks?
Oh, yes. It is Residential Learning Community. So we offer those for all the residents that we have on campus, so also first years, continuing students, and transfers. So when if you're a first year applying on the application, you'll preference your top 2 residential learning communities. And then these can change from year to year, because they don't always, but they can. And it's really based off of the demand of how many people want each one, as well as the corresponding programs demands. So what we do is we'll get the demand for each residential learning community once the application closes on May 7th. And then we'll start placing them in buildings that fit the demands of both the residents and the programs. So that being said, we don't have specific, this specific residential learning community always has triples, and this one only ever has doubles. It's all based off of the buildings that we place them in. So a lot of our buildings have an array of room types. The exceptions is North Mountain only has triples because they're a little bit bigger in room size. So if you have a residential learning community, it could be any of them that happens to be placed in North Mountain, then that means that you would see only triple rooms within that community. Other example would be in the South Mountain or Red Brick buildings. Those have both doubles and triples. So you have a chance of seeing either one of those if your residential learning community is placed there. Was there more to that question?
There was some questions about how you change your RLC. This is a couple of ways that you can do that. Our application, once you go in and submit your application, you are welcome to come back in and edit that application as many times as you want, in as many different ways as you want, including switching your RLC preferences, changing your roommate groups until May 7th. That's when we close the application for edits and start moving towards the assignments process. So if you want to switch around your RLCs now, you can do that now. If after room selection, you decide that you're really hoping for a different residential learning community or a different room type, we also offer room changes during this summer. So if there are spaces available in university housing, you can go ahead and submit a room change request right after room selection ends. So you can submit a request and we'll look at your request. We'll see what spaces we have available in university housing. And if we can, we will switch you into a space that meets your request if that's available. Room trades, though, are dependent on open rooms that we have. So the more flexible you are in terms of what you request for your room trade, the more likely it is that we will be able to find a room that matches what you're requesting. And you can also request a room trade after you move in. So once you get settled in, if you're still looking for a different residential learning community, a different room type, if you want to switch roommates, you can also put that request in your housing portal, and you can do a room trade that way.
Great. Let's chat a little bit about amenities. We've got a few questions about microwaves, coffee makers, things like that. Can somebody tell us what is in each hall and in each room? What do things come with? What should I bring? Should I bring my full-size fridge? Should I bring my 75-inch flat screen and my roommate's 40-inch flat screen? Tell us a little bit more. Maybe Clinton or one of our other folks who have worked in a residence hall, what can you tell us about what do all these halls come with?
Yeah, I can answer that. Sure, feel free to bring a 40-inch TV if that's really what you want. But to get a little more serious about it, each room is going to come with a mini fridge in it. North Mountain halls do have a microwave in each of the rooms as well. Usually it's on the floor. It's shared by that entire floor. But also to get into what kind of room furniture is in there, you're going to have a desk as well as a three drawer, a little wardrobe, and then a larger wardrobe for your clothes. You'll have a twin XL bed that's also included. And then for triples, I know we had some questions about this. Usually the layout of a triple is a bunk bed and then a lofted bed with a desk underneath, and that desk is going to be shared by two of the students in that room. If you have more questions about what is in the room or what the rooms look like, just go to the housing website, and there are a fair amount of pictures on there as well as some video tours that we put together.
One of the big recommendations that we have in terms of like what to bring when you get here is pack light. Most folks that we see during move-in pack way too much for the experience. You don't need much because the rooms are already filled with most of the staples that you would need. So pack light. It's a real bummer to move everything into your room on campus and have to move everything back out into your car. And if you're looking for a list of what to bring and then also what not to bring, we have that on our university housing website for both first-year students and for continuing students. Transfer students who are in an apartment. There's a little bit of different specifications for you can and cannot bring based off of residence hall versus apartment. You can find that on our university housing move-in page. So that's housing.calpoly.edu/move-in.
Great, and we've talked a lot about the rooms themselves where you'd be living in the residence halls. What about the common areas? You can speak to a little bit more about what you might find in the different common areas and different residence halls. One of our ambassador folks want to take that one? Or you can speak to the common area in the hall that you're familiar with.
I can talk about it.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so there are definitely a lot of different common area spaces that we have on campus. It's definitely geared towards each of the community complexes. I lived in Yakitutu my first year, and we had some common spaces we had were a bunch of community rooms where we had a microwave on every floor along with a water fill station. We had a kitchen on the first floor of every building, as well as 2 different types of study rooms, which were geared towards community projects or group projects. And then we had some 24-hour quiet. Other communities will have game rooms. And then there will be front desks for all of the communities as well, and you'll have that as a common space. Every community will have a kitchen and study spaces, as well as a recreational room, like a game room, or a very large kitchen, such like that. It all depends on what community you're in.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chloe. Anybody else want to elaborate on that? I think that pretty much covers it. What else could we talk about? A little bit more about RLCs. Does somebody have the full list open or want to speak to what their experience has been? Think about when you were a first-year student, how did you navigate the RLCs? What were some helpful tips? And did you enjoy the RLC you were in? Did you switch? Tell us a little bit more about that. Think from the perspective of an incoming student. Maybe somebody, we've got a couple out-of-state folks here in the chat I've seen. Tell us about what was it like, maybe as folks who didn't know anybody coming into school or maybe only knew a few people coming into Cal Poly, and then how did your RLC help you meet folks? And then also, what was it like picking the right one for you?
I can take that one, Zach.
All right, cool. Thanks, Anthony.
I was an undergrad student, was a freshman on campus about a decade ago, but not much has changed when it comes to the RLCs. They're still based on college, as well as some additional RLCs around lifestyle choices, interests, and leadership, different identity-based groups, and so forth. And so what I tell students when they are curious about what RLC is best for them is to make a list of what your priorities are. Because for some folks, it might be that you would most like to live in a community with people that you're going to be in class with. If you're an engineering student, you're in college of ag, college science and math, what have you, you're going to have your general education classes as well as your major specific ones. So if your priority is to be able to come home from class and sit down with people that you had in your intro to XYZ major class, then maybe your preferred RLC might be the one that corresponds with your college. That way you can be academically focused, you'll be in class with those folks, you can come back and have study groups in your residence hall. Each community tries their best to partner with our professors that teach the top 10 most popular classes in each community, so that we get those professors to come hold office hours in the community, or they do special study sessions in the community game room or in the study room. That way you don't even have to leave your residence hall when it's a couple days before the first midterm, let's say. Professor will come out and do those study sessions there. So for an academic focus, or maybe a future career development focus, you want to live around folks in similar majors, you might want to consider the RLC that corresponds with your college, with your major. If you look at the list and you feel more drawn towards substance-free environment because you don't want to be around drugs and alcohol, you want to have roommates who are of similar minds, or you have a better chance of having someone who doesn't use those types of substances, then that might be a good option for you. We have a number of options around cultural or identity-based groups as well. So I really suggest going to that website and finding, doing some deep reading, figure out what your priorities are and choose from there. Personally, I lived in the RLC that corresponded to my major. I was in the College of Agriculture. I lived in the RLC for cafes, College of Agriculture, Food, and Environmental Sciences, and I loved it. I was involved in Inter-Housing Council, which again is like our associated student body, like student government for residential students. And I got to have those meetings and coordinate programming with other folks that were in my college that kind of corresponded to the things we were had mutual interest in. And we got to bring professors in for more social and fun discussions outside of class. And at the same time, I got to meet people who not everyone in that hall is going to be of your major or even in your college. One of my best friends that I walked out of freshman year with, and is now going to be the best man in my wedding, he was in the College of Engineering, but happened to be in RLC because of how he and his roommate at the time mutually selected each other, and then they got cafes. So in summary, really do your homework, find out what is your priority in your residential learning community, and then read up on all the options on the website, and I would suggest choosing from there.
Yeah, and I have some insight on being like an out-of-state student also, along with that. And for me, like what Anthony was saying, my priority was to be with people who had like similar study habits than me. So that's why I ended up choosing the RLC of College of Engineering, because that's what the college I was in. And I also ended up using one of those unofficial, like non-Cal Poly affiliated Facebook groups to find roommates. And I knew that there were going to be a lot of just California people. And so I ended up finding one out-of-state person and one international student. And those were my two roommates. Personally, that ended up helping me a lot because I was with people who also like couldn't just go home for the weekend, and I wasn't like alone in my room, things like that. And so we all could kind of like bond over the fact that like we're pretty far from home compared to the people who are in state. So that was just kind of like one way to cope with that. Another thing is just like you're gonna be like friendly with the people you live with. Like you'll find people to spend time with, even if you're out of state and you're feeling alone. Like I've gone home with a bunch of in-state friends, so they've always like would ask me like, oh, I'm gonna go home this weekend, like do you want to come with, or things like that too, which is not really to do with RLCs, but that's just kind of like also a really nice way of feeling like more acquainted to the state as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you both for covering RLCs, our residential learning communities, which again is something that everybody will select. Instead of choosing a room, you choose a residential learning community, and then we assign those residential learning communities to our various residence halls depending on the volume of interest in those respective communities. So just to reiterate, you do not pick a building, you pick a residential learning community, which we will then assign to a building. So that takes place in the next couple months here, and then we let you know about it generally early summer, typically in June. And then room trades do occur all throughout the summer if you're interested in making those swaps. So just following up on a couple questions I'm watching in the chat. Thank you, Anthony and Keo, for filling in with those. Saw a couple questions about transportation around campus, both bringing cars and bringing bikes. So does someone who we haven't heard from yet on our panel want to speak to what was your experience either with a car or without a car? And then likewise, what's it like to bike around here?
I can answer part of that.
Okay,
So just to be clear that freshmen or first years are not allowed to bring cars on campus. There are very few exceptions to that. But most of all, you can't get a permit freshman year. But my freshman year, there's your poly card that you get works with the slow transit bus pass, and that can get you downtown into a few grocery stores, and so that can get you around slow. I personally didn't have a bike, but I had a lot of friends that did, and there's lots of bike racks around your buildings and around campus and around slow too, so it can get you around campus and around town. For my second year, I lived in Poly Canyon Village, and I did bring a car, and you apply for a permit in one of the parking garages near PCV, and if you're in Sarah Vista, there's also parking lots around there that you can apply for. And if you're a continuing student or a transfer student and you're commuting to campus, you can also apply for permits for commuter lots that you can park in during the day for school.
sounds good. Yeah, and I would just add to the ubiquity of bike racks are absolutely everywhere here, and you'll see on a nice day, which is most days here in San Luis Obispo, there's people biking all over the place. And there's a little bit of a hill here and there, but nothing that you can't get used to. And I personally bike to and from work every day, and I think it's a great way to get around this town. Lots of bike paths and pretty friendly drivers for the most part, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, most first years do bring bikes. It's a great thing to have to just like zip around campus and get to your classes really quick and park right outside your classroom if parking and racks are pretty much everywhere. If you do bring a bike onto campus, we do suggest that you bring a really good bike lock as well. And then also, just because there are hills, I would suggest a bike with gears. Beach cruises are fun, but sometimes they're a workout and they're heavy. So bikes with gears is what I would recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. And some other transport alternatives. Carolyn mentioned that your student ID also doubles as a bus pass for slow transit. That gets you all around town and links up with the MTA, like the bigger bus system here in the county. So there are some options to get out to some of the beach communities with that. There's a question about how first years get to the beach. And then also Zipcar, there was a few questions about that. Does somebody, well, I guess I can just say that Zipcar is a ride sharing or a car sharing app rather that you can sign up for. And I personally haven't used it. As somebody who has used it, want to speak to what your Zipcar experience has been like. And I know also there's Uber and Lyft and those ride sharing apps here on campus as well.
I've used Zipcar a lot freshman year as well as this year because I didn't have a car on campus, and neither did my friend. We didn't use, for second years, we didn't have we chose to opt out of a dining pass, so we needed to go to the grocery store, and we used Zipcar a lot. We used Zipcar a lot last year to go to the beach with a bunch of friends. It is a lot cheaper, and you can use it for a couple hours. It's something that's different than Lyft, so you'll have to sign up with the Zipcar program, and they mail you a driver's license that will get you into the car. And with that, you can like rent the car out for a couple hours, and it costs around I think $6 or $7 an hour, which is a lot cheaper when you're thinking when you're trying to go from back and forth rather than an Uber. We used it a lot and we found it really helpful, especially with our friends not having cars. And when you split the cost between 5 people, it gets pretty cheap. Yeah, I really liked it, but I used the bus a lot as well.
And also, Zach mentioned something about rideshare apps. There's for getting home in regards. A lot of students on campus live in the Bay Area or San Diego or LA areas in California. And there's rideshare Facebook pages that you can post, and you can find lots of rides to get home on weekends if you need to get home for a certain thing or over breaks. So it's not always that your parents have to come and pick you up, or you have to take the train or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And saw a question about the slow airport as well. And I've only lived in San Luis Obispo for a little bit more than a year and have noticed that the flights have increased greatly. And it seems like there's a lot of service, not just to the kind of hubs nearby, LAX, SFO, that sort of thing, but they are starting to fly to Vegas and a bunch of other direct flights to either major cities or other hubs all around the Southwest and kind of up to the Pacific Northwest too. I know Seattle and Portland are either started or have plans to in the near future, depending on how the current situation goes. So more big flights coming in and out of San Luis Obispo all the time. As Anthony kind of responded to a chat here, Santa Barbara and Santa Maria also regional options, but either the Bay Area or the LA area are probably the 2 zones that you'd want to head to, which are kind of in that 3 to 4 hour range, either north or south. But as I believe Chloe mentioned or Carolyn mentioned, that there are there's buses, there's Amtrak, there's things like that are also good ways to get around here. So also sharing rides with your friends, with your roommates, things like that, definitely an option. Let's see what else we have going on here. We had some questions about transfer students as they relate to RLCs. So I know a few of you are transfer students. Who wants to speak to the transfer student experience? What was it like coming to Cal Poly from somewhere else? And tell us about what the RLC part of that experience was like for you in particular.
I'm not sure if we have any transfer students here with housing, but I can speak to it a little bit. So transfers do have residential learning communities. There are fewer than first years. We do have some. We have a substance-free community you can request. There's also culture identity communities, a pride community, and then a transfer community. We do have a limited number of spaces for transfers because our continuing students have already secured housing. They've already selected spaces for next year. So we set aside about 300 spaces for transfer students. So if you do know that you want to live on campus in our campus apartments as a transfer, I would suggest that you secure housing as soon as possible, just so we can make sure that you snag a space. The application closes after all of our spaces are filled, but we do start a wait list, so you can sign up after that if you need to. And of course, we will get you in if we have spaces available to get you in. In terms of RLCs, our transfer community is the most popular choice for transfer students. It's a nice way to get kind of engaged with other transfers on campus because you're all coming from the same situation. And transfers for next year, we do know because our continuing student housing has already been placed in the apartments. Transfer housing is going to be in Cerro Vista next year, which is one of our 2 apartment communities. There's Cerro Vista and Poly Canyon Village. Some of our transfer students can be placed in PCV. We tend to have fewer spaces up there available, and all of our college RLCs are up there. But if you do request a shared room as a transfer student, then you would be placed in Poly Canyon Village because that's where the shared room options are. And then if you have a very specific request as a transfer student in terms of housing that you don't see an option for on the application to fill in, I'd always just suggest emailing housing@calpoly.edu. Oftentimes, if we have available spaces, for example, in a college RLC, it's not guaranteed, but if we have spaces available, we do try to meet as many requests as we can. If we can do it. So if you have a special request as a transfer, feel free to email us and we can check availability in some other communities.
Sounds good. And then we also had a question about Quarter Plus. Has anybody participated in Quarter Plus here? And then who wants to speak to that one?
I can, Zach.
Okay.
Quarter Plus, we try our best to get you into, when you move on to campus initially, that will be your room for the next year. We try as hard as possible to make that happen. But during the Quarter Plus month or so, all students are living together. Everyone in Quarter Plus is living in the same residence hall in the same community. So those that will be staying in that community typically get to stay put, and that'll be your room for the full academic year. But if your assignment is going to be elsewhere within housing for the academic year, once WOW week starts, you would transition over to your actual academic year assignment. That makes sense.
All right. Thank you. And then we had some questions about dining. Does somebody want to tell us what's the dining situation like here on campus? Tell us about a few of your favorite dining outlets, and then what's Vista Grande?
Annie, why don't you take that question?
Yeah, so Vista Grande is going to be opening in the fall, which is pretty exciting. After a little delay of a couple of years, but there are I think 6 venues are going to be available, and it's several story building, and it's really centered in a great location in comparison to the first year residence communities. So it's very accessible for those first year students. It's going to include a lot of different venues, because the second that opens, a lot of our previous venues are going to be under construction. So the Vista Grande will probably be where most first years have most of their find most of their dining options. But there are like several Starbucks trucks, and like a 24-hour Subway, different eateries spread out around campus. So if you're at the library, you can still find food, and then if you walk across campus, there's always plenty of options. But back to Vista Grande, so options will include like an allergen-free window. There'll be one window is going to be like a noodles theme. Like they're gonna have different titles like that and have different focuses. But dining has been working really hard to create new menus. And so the first floor of Vista Grande is a kosher friendly deli and Jamba Juice. And then the second floor will have 6 different eateries. Like I was listing off noodles. There'll be one called like that's kind of a dessert bar, and a couple other things like that. And then the third floor is meeting space and has a great view of SLO.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions about pictures of the residence halls and kind of seeing inside. Yeah, unfortunately, we would love to show you all in person, obviously, but due to our current circumstances, we built a few resources here. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation. I'll go over it again here. The green screen that you all can hopefully see with a few resources listed. So we've got our housing.cal poly FAQs there. Our open house brochure contains a few images, and if that link isn't working, which I understand it wasn't for some people, you can also find that on our housing.calpoly.edu website. It's under our student housing aspect. Explore Cal Poly is the main resource I would point you to, though. If you're looking for a little bit more visual assistance of what we've got going on up here on campus, you can check out virtual campus tours and virtual housing tours right there. So that's calpoly.edu/explore Cal Poly. 3 different words separated by dashes there after the /. So that's the best place. You can have a look around at all the residence halls. Also on our housing.calpoly.edu website, there are room layouts and things like that. Once you kind of delve into the first year housing page or the transfer and continuing page, depending on which population you fit in, you can see room layouts, you can get measurements, things like that, all on that housing.calpoly.edu website. We really try to compile all of our resources there and make them easy to navigate. If you do ever have any questions, We've got a few more minutes to answer questions, but I'm just going to also throw our email in the chat box for everybody. It's just housing@calpoly.edu. We've got a great team up here who's happy to continue answering all your questions as we proceed here. So just wanted to mention that if we don't get to your specific question, feel free to reach out to us via email, and we're happy to get to you there as well.
I noticed quite a few questions about essentially like doubles, triples, and quads and where they are. So I can talk a little bit about room type and then also placement in those rooms. So the housing communities themselves have, based off of the style of residence halls, you may have different amenities available. North Mountain is all triples. Next year, we're expecting Yakitutu to be mostly triples and quads, with maybe a handful of doubles that are primarily going to be ADA accessible rooms. And then,
is there a way for me to request a double in Yakitutu, Julia? I saw that a couple times.
No, unfortunately, that all happens during the room selection process. So in your application, you can specifically request a lower cost room, which is a triple room or a quad room, and then we would do our best to get you into a lower cost option. Not clicking that button doesn't mean that you will automatically get a double. And then having a roommate group of 2 also doesn't mean that you'll automatically get a double. Doubles are very, very popular. They tend to get picked up first. So if you're a 2-person group and in a community that has doubles available, absolutely, go ahead and select a double if you see one available. If they are all fill and they do have a tendency to fill first, just keep in mind that you may have to assign yourself into a triple or a quad if that's what's available. And then if you're a group of 2, that means a 3rd person during room selection can come in and fill that additional space in the triple or the quad. So those are available to other folks during room selection if your group doesn't fill all of the rooms, all of the spaces within the room. Once a room selection has finished, you will get everybody's name in your room, and you can start chatting with each other, especially if there are folks that are outside of your initial roommate group, and start strategizing on what to bring and what is a common resource, and also things like what are the house rules for your room.
And then do you want to, sorry, that was kind of a sidetrack there. You were also letting us know what kind of room layouts the other residence halls have, if you want to quickly. So we got to North Mountain and Yakitutu, and then I sidetracked you there. So if you want to round that out, that'd be great.
Yosemite, Sierra Madre, and the Red Bricks or South Mountain have a mixture of doubles and triples. So that rounds out the rest of them. So North Mountain is all triples. Yakitutu is going to be primarily triples and quads. And then the remaining 3 have a mixture of doubles, triples, and quads. Sorry, doubles and triples. I apologize.
Sounds good. Let's see what else. Yeah, we had a question about AC, and as kind of a couple of the comments responded here in San Luis Obispo, we are pretty lucky with the weather. We've got natural AC built in most of the year with the fog coming off the coast. When it gets really hot during the day, then it cools it off nicely at night. You are allowed to bring a fan to your room if you like, but we don't offer AC. And then we had a question here about how does room selection work? Would somebody like to speak to how that happens? So we have the May 7th deadline to complete your housing application, and then room selection opens again in June. Who wants to tell us a few more details about that?
Room selection itself is based on a lottery. So when you submit your application, if you edit your application, none of that impacts room selection at all. It is a straight lottery, so everybody has an equal chance. Room selection I like to compare to essentially like picking seats on a plane or picking seats at a concert. The earlier you get in, the more options you have available to you. So that's what the lottery determines, is your room selection appointment. After May 7th, we pause everybody who has had their application finalized and submitted by May 7th is included in that lottery. And then you get all distributed room selection appointment times. And then we invite you to come back in during your room selection appointment and pick a space for yourself and any roommates that you have. So you'll want to strategize with your roommate group when you receive your room selection appointments. Who's got the best appointment time, that person goes in and selects a space for everybody in the group. If at the time of your room selection appointment, your first preference is available, you'll see all the spaces in your first preference. If during your room selection, your first preference is full, but your second preference is open, that is what you'll see and what you'll have to choose from. If at the time of your appointment and you're a little bit later in the process, both your first and your second one are filled, then you'll see all remaining spaces across our first year housing communities as a first year. So room selection is for first years, and that is how it works. One big tip, and Keo mentioned it earlier, is that all roommates should have matching RLC preferences in the same order. That's really, really important to getting all of your group into the same area.
Sounds good. So that hour flew by. We're getting close to the end here. And I want to go around and hear from all our panelists. Think of one thing that you wish you'd known before you came to Cal Poly. What's one thing that you wish you'd known as a first year student coming in here that you'd like to share with everyone? While you're thinking about that, I just want to let everybody else who's participating know, thank you so much again for joining us here. Hopefully we answered a lot of your questions. And again, you can feel free to email housing@calpoly.edu if you have any more specifics. And please visit our website as well to check out all of our resources, housing.calpoly.edu, as well as that Explore Cal Poly webpage is a great resource for virtual housing tours, virtual campus tours, things like that. And then also, there's a couple questions about where you can find this presentation. All of these presentations have been recorded, and the admissions office is hosting them on their Facebook. So we're going to work with them within the next few days. Hopefully we'll have this presentation up there as well. So unless anybody else has anything to add, we'll go ahead and go down the list. What's one thing you wish you'd known coming into Cal Poly? Annie, I see you at the top of the list on my screen, so we'll start with you.
Yeah, one thing you hear a lot about is like complaints about the food. To be honest, I didn't have a problem with that at all, actually. So that was kind of something that surprised me. It was definitely like a fine experience. And then also I've seen someone asking about like the blender a couple times. So I think since it plugs in, you're not supposed to have it in your room. But what you can do is bring one. I guess someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but bring one and then you can bring it down to your community kitchen and plug it in. And that's a safe place to plug it in. Okay, yeah, yep. Getting a thumbs up. So that's a safe place you can get that to work, because a blender isn't like a provided, there isn't a communal blender. So that's what I did, and smoothies are great. So food is good here.
Sounds good. Julia, you're next on my list. Can you think of what do you think is a helpful tip that you'd send out to people? I see Julia and then Anthony and then Emma, and we'll go down the list.
Yeah. One of the things I always recommend for first year students, even though like this is all about housing and we're talking about housing, we're talking about room types and things like that. I mean, your room is like a study space, it's a sleeping space, but as a first year especially, try to spend as little time as your room outside of studying as possible. I really recommend that first years and all new students, what they can, really immerse themselves in campus life. Your first year, you're meeting a ton of new people, and there's so many opportunities to get involved and like find your new Mustang family, and that's within housing with like the programs that you can attend, but also just across campus, what you learn here, your first year, and the people that you meet here, your first year here, really provide a foundation for the rest of your Cal Poly experience and also the rest of your life. A lot of folks keep the friends that they find here in housing for for so long. So I would suggest getting out and about, join a campus club, go to the free lectures, go to plays. You know, there's so much you can do at Cal Poly, and your first year is such a great time to do that, because that's when you're really making those relationships that carry you through the next 4 years.
Great, thank you. All right, so we got Anthony, Emma, and Carolyn.
Gosh, I would say, I would tell my first year self, yes, you have lots of questions. Yes, there's plenty of areas or plenty of resources to go to for answers. So I would, I wish I knew I could just email housing@calpoly.edu for all of my housing questions. I wish I knew about all of the resources on campus that you already pay for in your tuition, whether it's to help study for classes through the Writing Rhetoric Center, whether it's about lining up the classes you're going to take for next quarter after, and creating an academic plan through either the Mustang Success Center or through the College Advising Center related to your major. I wish I knew all those things coming in. And this was, again, 10 years ago. So now, like, you can literally Google what your question is, Cal Poly, or advertising Cal Poly, housing Cal Poly. And so many of these questions can be answered online, or at the very least can give you an email address or a phone number to call. So I would tell myself, yes, you have lots of questions. It's all going to work out just fine. You're going to meet so many people that are going to be lifelong friends. You're going to learn a lot, both in the classroom and out of the classroom. And all your questions can be answered through the internet or through a quick phone call or email to a resource on campus.
Nice. We've got Emma, Carolyn, Chloe.
Yeah, for me, I think it would be that getting involved brought my grades up. Like, the more I started to branch out into the SLO community, and the more I started to get involved in clubs and really like make those connections with the community, build study groups, things like that, I just felt a lot more positive going around campus, and like my grades actually went up then when I was like, no, like quarter system's super hard, you can only study. But the more I started to kind of reach out into the community, the better I started to kind of thrive here at Cal Poly. So I would say definitely try to get involved early. It really makes a difference.
I would just say that something I wish I knew was that everyone else that's coming in wants to make friends and find people that they're like just as much as you do. And no matter what RLC you're in, no matter, like what building, where you're living, people are going to want to get to know you, and you're going to find people in your classes. Or there's also with WOW, and there's like club fairs that go on at the beginning of the year, that there's a lot of ways that people are going to reach out to you as long as you're reaching out to them. So it's a lot easier to find your people that you want to spend your time with than I thought it was going to be.
Sounds good. We got Chloe, Keo, Clinton, Wen, and then that'll wrap things up for us.
One thing I didn't think of coming in as a freshman was that random roommates would work. I personally came in with a roommate, someone I knew since birth, and it went really well for us. What I didn't realize is everyone else on my floor came in with random roommates, and they're all really good friends, and it worked out really well, and I didn't see any super issues with that. And then another thing is office hours. I never went to office hours my first and second quarter at school because it scared me, but now I go into one of my professor's classes, office hours, every week, and I don't even have him as a professor anymore for one of my classes, just because it's so fun to just talk to them and get to know them, and they're really there for you. And I think that's a really cool thing about Cal Poly, is it's not there for the professor's there for you, and it's really cool.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so one thing that I guess it's more of like a regret, but like same with Anthony, I wish I used the resources more than I did, just because there are so many out there for first years specifically. And I think like I also was like sitting there just thinking like, what do I do for this, or how do I do this? And then I just sort of was either moved on and just didn't answer my question, or I just didn't know who to ask. And yeah, it's as simple as just emailing housing@calpoly.edu or anything along those lines. And as well, I like, you hear all these things about how you're going to like get your lifelong friends here and all those kinds of things. And immediately you're going to like find the people that you like totally mesh with. And personally, I didn't find those people immediately. So it's okay. So just it's okay if you don't find those lifelong friends immediately. And don't be discouraged because you still have about 4 years here to find those people. And the odds are really good that you will before you graduate. And so it's okay. It's just kind of trust the process, basically.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said previous to this. And I think my little tip would just be that you can move your layout of your room a little bit more. So I was in a double in the red bricks. I thought it was a little tight, but then my roommate and I agreed to make it a bunk bed, and then we moved our desks along the table and kind of made it our own space. So as long as you switch everything back at the end of the year and don't do anything too crazy, you do have that opportunity. So if you get in there and want to switch it up, feel free to. And university housing will work alongside you to make that happen.
I think it's my turn.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I think something that I would have really, really liked to tell myself my freshman year is coming in, not to stress so much about who your roommates are going to be, what your floor mates are going to be like, because you're going to meet so many people your first year who are from completely different cultural backgrounds, just backgrounds in general. And if you and your roommate don't exactly click like they do in the movies, you have 50 other floor mates who you're bound to find someone who you're going to bond with. And keeping an open mind really when you come into your first year.
Nice. Thanks, Wen, and thanks to all of our panelists for participating today, taking time out of your busy school weeks here as spring quarter is in full swing up here on campus, or virtually for the most part. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. And we will have this recording available on the admissions YouTube page, answering all your questions, as well as I mentioned, feel free to email us, housing@calpoly.edu. You also saw the front desk phone number here. We have student assistants standing by if you do have a question. That was in the chat there earlier as well. Also, we have tons of resources on that website, again, housing.calpoly.edu. As well as don't forget about the rest of Virtual Open House. There's a ton of other things going on, so I recommend going to calpoly.edu/virtual open house and have a look at the other segments. We've got one on first year room assignments going on tomorrow at noon that we're hosting, as well as one for parent and family supporters this evening at 5 p.m. The University Housing is taking part in as well as lots of other things going on this week with our virtual open house. So have a look at that as well. So thank you all so much for participating, and again, feel free to reach out to one of those resources if we didn't get your question answered, but hopefully we did, and we hope you're all staying safe and sane wherever you are, and we'll be in touch.